Now, recording the meeting. We're going to have a panel discussion. I'm going to introduce our moderator, Mr. Bankole Thompson. If you have any questions, please try to hold them until the moderator allows time for questions so that everybody's not trying to talk all at once. For the majority of the meeting, I'm going to try to keep everyone muted except for the panel so that way you all can hear clearly back and forth. Again, thank you for being here. We're going to have a very robust conversation about the state of policing and where we are at this current political climate with everything going on from Minneapolis to Atlanta to right here in Detroit. So I appreciate your interest again and your patience. And now I am going to hand it over to our moderator.
Thank you so much, Tina Patterson, president of the PuLSE Institute here. Thank you all for being here. I'm Bankole Thompson. I serve in many capacities. Among them is the editor-in-chief of the PuLSE Institute. As you know, the PuLSE is Detroit's independent anti-poverty think tank, has been doing a lot regarding the issues of inequality, poverty, economic justice. And what is happening right now around the country is right now speaks to economic justice and economic inequality. And there's a role that must be played here. And given where Detroit is, where this region is one of the most watched regions in the nation, Detroit is the largest Black city in the nation. The city of Inkster is one of the most renowned Black cities in the nation. So we are, in fact, right at the epicenter of this fight for equality, and police brutality, police accountability is part of that. And I think what we saw with the death of George Floyd, Rayshard Brooks, and of course, before them, Tamir Rice. I keep mentioning Tamir Rice because he's 12 years old. It's just so painful to think about that, and what that all means for this nation. And I think it's important we begin to move the conversation towards ending police brutality, ending police misconduct. A lot of reforms have been suggested out here to resolve this issue. And we have an eminent panelist, a distinguished panel, folks who have their pulse on these issues and in fact have been working on these kinds of issues from different angles. And for those of you who are tuning in, thank you all for taking time to be part of this discussion, because for the next hour and 45 minutes, we're going to have a real dialogue. And like Attorney Patterson said, this conversation is being recorded, so it's going to be available on Facebook. It's going to be available on the PuLSE website. I'll play excerpts of this conversation on the airwaves on my radio show on 9:10 a.m. Our panel this evening is eminently qualified to handle this topic because we didn't want to just come here and start just expressing rage. We wanted to have a dialogue. Rage is important, but we also want to have a dialogue. And we brought in individuals that we think can really begin to talk about what we need to do to end this issue. Let me begin with Tina Patterson. She, like I said, she's the president and director of research at the PuLSE Institute, one of the most courageous, brilliant lawyers in present-day Detroit, leading the PuLSE Institute. And what she has done before she joined the PuLSE, Tina was with the federal government as a lawyer for the Social Security Administration, where she was writing the opinions of administrative law judges from the United States and Puerto Rico. She decided, instead of going to be a federal prosecutor or going somewhere with the feds, she decided to lead the PuLSE Institute, which is something that is wonderful and certainly rewarding in terms of just her social justice trust. Our next panel here is Samuel Bagenstos. Samuel Bagenstos is a senior fellow at the PuLSE Institute. He just joined us recently in the last month or so. He's a law professor at the University of Michigan. But more importantly, which connects really to this conversation here, is that Samuel Bagenstos was the former deputy principal assistant attorney general for civil rights at the Justice Department under former President Barack Obama. What does that mean? He was the number 2 official, the number 2 in charge of the Justice Department Civil Rights Division in Washington, D.C. So there's a lot that comes with that responsibility. There's a lot that comes with that title. And so he's here tonight to really weigh in terms of where we go with police misconduct. He wrote a column for the PuLSE Institute a couple of weeks ago talking about just the role of the judiciary, which is really something that we don't normally talk about, because I think the conversation around policing starts with and ends with the police department, you know, Chief Riley, Chief Craig, but we don't really take it to the federal court, the circuit court, and so forth. So Samuel Bagenstos is coming from that direction. Our next guest is Sam Riddle. Sam Riddle is a veteran political analyst. in Detroit, over 40, 45 years of campaign, political analysis, has been on the ground, an activist, advocate, Vietnam era veteran. He always likes to let people know that. And he's also a graduate of the University of Michigan Law School. Sam Riddle is the host of Riddle Roundup on the 910 AM Superstation. Also, our next panelist is William Riley, the police chief of the City of Inkster. Inkster is one of, Inkster is very close to the heart of a lot of Black folk, I can tell you that. They love the City of Inkster. It almost comes second. The folks in Benton Harbor will get mad at me for saying that, because we love Benton Harbor too. But Inkster, because of the history of Inkster, the Henry Ford, the Black middle class, and all of that, Inkster is the epicenter of the Black experience here in Michigan and the larger Black experience nationally. And Chief William Riley is the police chief of the City of Inkster. And of course, he came from Selma to Inkster. So this is our panelists here. I'm going to ask each of them to just say 3 minutes, just how their work, the work that they're doing, is connected to this conversation. Let me start with Sam Riddle. Do we have someone? All right, Sam, are you there? Okay, let's go to Chief Riley.
The host muted me.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that, Sam. You're on.
Okay,
right,
yeah.
So Sam,
okay.
Sam, did you hear the introductions I was given?
Yeah, I heard everything,
Okay,
but the host muted me. That's all. A lot of people would like to mute me, Chief Riley.
Not here.
I got a good friend, Catherine Coleman Flowers from Selma, Alabama. She does a lot of good work down there. But the work of Banker A. Thompson and other members, and those of you who are joining us on Zoom, I am the political director of the Michigan National Action Network.
Oh, that's right.
Our national leader here on the screen in back of me, this is when we were both younger. He was a little heavier. We both had darker hair, is the Reverend Al Sharpton. When you talk about what's happening in this nation in terms of the killing of human beings by police, there's no organization more involved than our organization, founded by the Reverend Sharpton over my shoulder here. I've known him for over 28 years now. And we've been on the front lines. There's not a major case that you'll speak of involving police brutality. Eric Garner, his mother, Gwen Carr. I've interviewed her on radio when I've substituted for Reverend Sharpton, along with Reverend Charles Williams II here from New York City, when we've done Keeping It Real, Sharpton Show. But every major case you see, George Floyd, you saw our founder and president, Reverend Sharpton, eulogize him. Wherever these tragedies occur, you'll find the National Action Network. And that's why today, one of the things that I saw on TV that really struck me, and it's gone viral, you mentioned Tamir Rice, Banker A. Thompson, and there was a youngster in Connecticut, a young Black boy, maybe 8 or 9 years old. He was bouncing a basketball in his driveway, and one of those cameras, security cameras, caught him bouncing the basketball, and suddenly a police SUV pulled up in the street. The child quit bouncing the basketball and hid behind the family vehicle until the police car had passed. His father spoke to him about it. Why did he do that? He was afraid. A youngster, Black youngster, Connecticut, only 8 or 9 years old, hid from a police SUV, clearly marked, just going down the street in front of his house, because he is afraid of the police, because even at his age, he knows police kill Black children, and he's in a state of fear. That to me, and I used to have the dubious distinction when I worked as an assistant prosecutor trying all the mental cases in the county of 500,000 many years ago in the 70s. But that's a form of post-traumatic stress disorder already inflicted on an 8 or 9 year old Black child that knows police kill Black children, kill Black people. I felt the pain of Eric Garner's mother, Gwen Carr, whose book I've got here over my shoulder that she autographed. When I interviewed her in New York, of course, Eric Garner was choked to death by a New York City policeman. It took 5 years. There wasn't the quick action we saw in Minneapolis. before that officer was eventually fired. You see, to me, the big issue we're talking about here, and it's something to the whole discussion about defunding the police, that terminology leaves a bad taste in some folks' mind, but we have to completely reorder what we refer to now as public safety. You see, public safety has never been the objective. Protecting things of white people, protecting privileged white people while keeping Black human beings in their place, while denying the very humanity of Black human beings, has been ingrained in the value system and culture of policing America. And that's why I'm so glad to participate in this discussion, because I believe we got to turn that upside down by focusing on public safety and well-being for all, with something akin to a check for those suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, like that youngster who has witnessed on TV unwarranted encounters with the police. We've got to get away from that whole process. The last column I did, and I'm wrapping up with this, the last column I did for the PuLSE Institute, Chief Riley, was don't call the police. Thank you.
All right. Sam Riddle wears many titles. He's the political director for the National Action Network, Michigan chapter of the National Action Network. He's also a senior fellow at the PuLSE Institute. Let me go to Chief Riley, and then we'll make our way to the rest of the panel. Chief Riley, just a few remarks from you in terms of how this discussion relating to your work.
Well, I can tell you, it was police brutality that brought me to Michigan, that brought me to the City of Inkster, that had the City of Inkster and those involved reach out to someone to come in. It was brutality. And I'm sure many of you remember that video of that white officer beating that Black guy on the hood of that vehicle. And that's what brought me to Inkster. And when I clearly asked, I said, hey, look, I'm way down here in the South. There's plenty of chiefs in between. And pretty much the answer was, we wanted somebody with no connection, somebody that did not care, but would come in and make the transformation that needed to be made for the city and for the department. And I only had one basic question to ask him, and that was, is there anybody in there that I cannot fire? It was simple. And the answer to me was, everybody was on the table. And when that was told to me, you know what? I said, hey, brother, I'm here. Let's make it happen. Now, since I've been in the City of Inkster, one of the things that I quickly looked at was the fact that I'm not into this reform stuff. I mean, that may turn people off. I'm into transformation. We have been reforming police in the city, in this country, for over 100 years. And coming right back to the same spot every time a crisis hit. Unacceptable, and it should be unacceptable to all people. Transformation is what we need in policing. Transformation is what we need in city government, state government, and federal government. It's got to be transformation. And it ties directly into poverty. It ties into people that are sick and cannot get proper care. It ties into what's going on with our elderly. But when we talk about police brutality, we're looking at the community. And it's sad to see that a young man, a young boy, is scared to see when a police car go down the street. To me, it's unacceptable to me for the handle. But for us in the City of Inkster, we've transformed. We're not reformed, we've transformed how we do business. We work closely with IGERA to bring people out with us when we deal with mental health, so that we can interrupt that pipeline from mental health to jail. Instead of that, we're taking them to the hospital, we're taking them to a treatment center where they can get the proper treatment. We're getting them counselors. We even do the same when we deal with substance abuse and whatnot. We also look at make sure that our officer was trained in understanding the issues of mental health and what to look for when we're dealing with people, and to show that compassion. We're not out here trying to lock up everybody. We're out here trying to solve problems. We also work with communities. Okay, we're going to work with communities. I'm going to say we work with communities, faith-based and businesses, so that they can help us hire police officers that look like the community. And we've had several people, several individuals and businesses step up to the plate to say, hey, look, Chief, we will pay for your men to go to the police academy so that you can get the help you need in the City of Inkster. That's transforming. That's not reforming, that's transforming how we operate within the community. And that is what needs to happen, because what's happening now with this brutality and poverty and things, hey, look, people say, don't point the finger. Well, you got to point the finger. You just can't let everything continue to go on like it's been going on. But there's more than to it just the police chief, okay? It's more to deal with just, okay, it's the police chief fault, it's the sheriff fault. We have to look at those that have been comfortable over the decades in this country with how policing has been going on in this country. We have to look at those that have sat by idle by, and some of those that sat idle by look like you and me, Bangalore.
Trust me, I can give you an entire list in Detroit.
Okay, I'm just trying to say some have sat by that allowed this to go on. So why I'm here is for to push that issue of understanding that no, not reform people. We have to have transformation in policing as a whole, a strong accountability in policing as a whole. Because one of the first things I told the people when I first got here at the office, I made it very clear to them, I'm not here to be their friend. I'm here for public safety, for the citizens of Inkster that have been dumped on, that have had, paying for a lawsuit that they shouldn't have to pay for because of bad decisions that have happened. That's who I'm here for. And if any of them didn't like it, they had two questions. They had two things to do. Give me a letter of resignation or give me a letter of early retirement, whatever they wanted to do. If I had to replace them, and I told them, if I had to replace half of them today, I would go to the state police and say, look, give me some help till I can get through these times. All I need is 6 months and I'll get them back to where I need to be. But this thing of defunding police, I think I understand what they're trying to do, but
right, and we are going to come into that. The discussion is already getting heated now, and I can see where this is going.
I'm passionate about what I'm passionate. I'm just telling you right now.
This is good. This is great. This is great. I think you laid out some fundamentals. I think Sam laid out some markers, and I'm listening now. Let's go to Samuel Bagenstos, former Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights at the Justice Department. Sam, your take in terms of the work that you do, your past work, and how it ties to this conversation.
Yeah, so thanks, Bankole, and thanks for hosting this. I mean, I think this is such an important and timely issue, and it's great to be able to talk with these panelists. I will say Sam Riddle began by talking about Reverend Sharpton. When I was at the Department of Justice in the Obama administration, Reverend Sharpton was incredibly constructive in working with us to help us make connections with the communities that were affected by police misconduct, police violence, police abuse, so that we could actually make some changes in some big departments around the country. And I really appreciate the leadership that Chief Riley is demonstrating, has demonstrated, is demonstrating here. And I think the way Chief Riley talked about it is exactly right. We have been going through cycles of let's reform the police for decades, for a century. As long as we've had police, people have said we need to reform police. And, in some ways, there's nothing new under the sun. We know, what we need to do. We know what we can do that will reduce abuse. But we also need to know that there are things that we are asking the police to do that police shouldn't be doing. And so part of that is responding to mental health issues, and part of that is various kinds of, crisis resolution and conflict resolution, where you don't necessarily need armed police officers or police officers at all to do it. In fact, there are plenty of places where community-based organizations do much better. Reducing the footprint of the police in responding to particular in responding to crises in the community, I think is incredibly important here, as well as adopting a number of policies that, I think we all understand what they are. You need use of force policies. You need to have, bystander intervention. So Chief Riley talked about the people who stand by and just let this stuff happen, right? You need to have accountability for people who do stand by and let bad stuff happen, and for people who do bad stuff. And you need to have, this is what I wrote about in my column for the PuLSE Institute a couple of weeks ago, you need to have institutions like courts and judges who are actually going to hold people accountable. And one of the things I'm very proud to have served under President Obama. We did a lot to try to actually enforce for the first time, really, a law that John Conyers was central in passing to give the federal government the power to go into police departments with a pattern or practice of police misconduct and actually make systemic changes in those departments. And we went all around the country and we did that. You know, a lot of places actually invited us in. Cory Booker, when he was the mayor of Newark, invited us in. He said, you know, we have a problem here and we need to fix it. A lot of places fought us, places like Maricopa County, Arizona, Sheriff Joe Arpaio, some of you may have heard of, fought us every step of the way, and we forced change there. But you know, all that is great, and we forced creation of some of these policies that we all know can reduce the incidence of police abuse. But at the same time as that was happening, we weren't making changes to the judiciary. We have judges appointed by both Democratic and Republican presidents and governors who consistently let police officers who violate the Constitution off the hook, which means there's no accountability. And we also don't confront the fundamental question of, are we asking the police to be intervening too much? Are there aspects of problems in our cities and society that the police are the place we go? And what that leads to is the potential for, and unfortunately the tragic realization of violence, when we could be building community-based conflict resolution, we could be building up mental health crisis that didn't have a police footprint in it. There are good models for this, and we really need to move in those directions. And you know, I had a lot of experience with that at the Department of Justice as well, helping to stand up community-based crisis intervention that didn't have police involvement, that actually reduced jail populations, that reduced arrests, that reduced the incidence of police violence, and that provided better mental health treatment to people. So there are things we can do, and we just need to make a commitment to do them. And that's what I have to say. I'm really looking forward to our discussion.
Definitely. There you go. Samuel Bagenstos, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights at the Department of Justice in Washington. Let me go to Attorney Tina Patterson. Tina, your take, overall opening statement on this, and we'll begin the questioning right after Tina speaks. I got a lot of questions, and of course, we're going to weave in our audience questions as well, because I see a lot of people are tuning in. So we're going to weave in your questions as well. Tina, let me go to you.
Thank you. So I look at it through a point of political accountability and also public policy as far as what our public officials can do. Too often we hear that nothing can be done about it, or you know, we don't see anyone raising their hand to fix the problem, even though we know this is a problem that has been continuing for centuries. If you look right here in Detroit with our current city council and our current mayor and our current executive administration, it's like nothing is a problem. Like there is nothing that we can resolve, so why even, you know, look to do anything? You know, there's just this lack of political creativity, a lack of political accountability, and a lack of imagination, really. You know, there's always an excuse to why it can't be done. But if you look around the country, it's not like that elsewhere. If you look at Minneapolis, you know, the area, the main area where it's happening right now with George Floyd, the Minneapolis City Council didn't say, well, we can't do anything, so next. You know, they didn't pass on it because obviously there's public pressure to do something about it, number one. But also, number two, they're public servants, so they should do something about it. They're directly accountable for it, and they're directly inherently empowered to do something about it. So they didn't just say, oh, well, we can't do anything. You know, we hear you, we stand with you, we march with you, but we're not going to do anything. No, they immediately disbanded the police as it was, because it obviously wasn't working, and they had a history of police problems starting before George Floyd. That was just, for some reason, the tidal wave of it all. So the city council, you know, basically disbanded the police department as it was so that they can reimagine public safety, right? Not the militarization of police, but a reimagining of what that branch, that critical branch of public safety looks like. They made it veto proof so that they could take the reins on it. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey confronted a crowd of protesters and basically said he was not in support of defunding the police, and they booed him out of there. And to me, that was a very strong statement, because that was the people telling their leader, this is not working for us, you're not working for us, and we don't want to hear what you have to say because you're not keeping us safe the way it's going anyway. So to me, that was a very powerful statement as from a government standpoint, what can be done, because we always hear about how it cannot be done, because it's just such a lack of creativity, and again, just a comfort level with what is already. People don't like to change, and they don't like to reimagine things, especially if they're already comfortable sitting in the system the way it is. And Minneapolis is not the only department around the country that has made some changes. And the Colorado, I think, legislature was just maybe in the last week or two, they instituted actually a series of public policy reforms when it came to the police department, including, you know, a public database and some things that you don't hear about or that are unpopular because it can't be done. You know, it just can't be done. There's never an explanation for it. It just can't happen. So for me, I look at it from a standpoint of who can do something about it, number one. And I think it's everyone that raises their voice, but also the people that have direct, inherent political power that are actually elected, right, to make these decisions. And it's not just one branch of government. Sam Bagenstos gave a very detailed account of how the judiciary itself can change, and the judiciary is empowered with a lot of independence to do that. But you also look at the city councils, you look at the state legislatures. These are the lawmakers. They can do things. They can pass ordinances. They can pass bills in the Senate, in the House. You know, they can institute those changes if they take the power and the responsibility to do it. The mayors, the governors, we've seen during this pandemic especially, how much can be done when crisis hits. It can be done immediately. Executive orders can be instituted immediately, and not just as a power grab, but as a measure of public safety. That's exactly what we have going on in the country right now. Police brutality and police misconduct has long been a public safety issue. It's long been, quite honestly, a pandemic in the Black community for centuries. So we need to think about it that way. We can't just sit and say this is another incident. It'll blow over. We can't do anything about it because it's never changed before. This is the perfect time to seize upon the moment and finally institute lasting change. So I think that is the most critical piece from my standpoint in the work I do.
Again, this is I'm already tempted to say you're listening to but I forgot this is not Red Line, this is the PuLSE Institute. Our guests here, eminent panel here, Sam Riddle, political veteran, Inkster Police Chief, William Riley, civil rights attorney Samuel Bagenstos, and of course, PuLSE Institute President Tina Patterson here. We're looking at police accountability, police confronting police brutality in the era of police accountability. And we're going to come to your questions. If you have a question, just signal us. You can certainly send us a private message here, and we'll tell us you want to ask a question, and we'll bring you in. But Sam, let me take this directly to you, and from Sam, I'm going to go to Chief Riley here. A lot of events are happening. We saw the Rayshard Brooks. We saw George Floyd. And a couple of days ago, Sunday evening, we saw what happened with the police cruiser in Detroit when a police truck rammed through a group of protesters. The question here is, there's an urgency of now. You know, Dr. King always talked about an urgency of now. What I'm thinking is, what do you think ought to happen on the political side, Sam, to really rein in police misconduct so folks know that, look, we're tired of having this. Like Chief Riley said, we've been talking about reform, you know, and every year we come to the same thing. I feel like 6 months from now, we may come back again to another period where we are mourning the death of someone else.
Yeah, well, you know, Bankole, let me say this. Policing in America was never set up to provide public safety or the well-being of the citizenry. I go back to my opening comment, public safety was never the objective. Protecting things of white people, enriched, privileged white people, and keeping Black human beings in their place has been the role of policing, in particular in urban America. There's no clearer example of that than the arrogance of a Detroit run like a plantation when Mayor Duggan and a guy I dubbed Hollywood Craig in a series of columns I once wrote for the Michigan citizen, and the chief has no problem with that. We talked about that designation, but because of how he works the media. But when you have a situation where a police car, a deadly weapon in and of itself, when there's a comfort zone with the mayor, the executive branch of government, and the police chief saying, what do you expect? They jumped on the police car. And then they come up with a disingenuous, we thought shots had been fired. They knew shots hadn't been fired. They knew what they were dealing with. But you did the same type of behavior that civilian did in Charlottesville when he didn't like what was happening with the protests. And he ran over in Charlottesville when they were having those Nazis down that way. And the president said everyone was nice people on both sides, and killed a young lady. Killed a young lady. That gentleman was from Toledo, right here in this area. Cars are used as weapons. The police department has to be reined in. We have a city council, unfortunately, in Detroit that has become an appendage, not functioning in a system of checks and balances as a legislative branch, but this Detroit City Council functions as a rubber stamp and an appendage of the executive branch, that is Mayor Duggan's office. And when they do that, they're disenfranchising the citizenry, majority Detroit, which is an endangered species given the behavior, the systemic behavior pattern of the Detroit Police Department, which arrogantly, with the support of the Mayor Duggan, feels that they can treat these protesters any old way that they want to. They actually, now everyone wants to blame the protesters, but the behavior of the police department structured conflict in that setting. And they were asking for it attitude out there that could lead to the loss of life in Detroit that need not occur if we redefine the whole approach to public safety. See, people don't understand the difference between policing and public safety. And that's why in Los Angeles today, the Los Angeles City Council approved a $150 million cut to the Los Angeles Police Department's budget, and they're going to reallocate those dollars, just like the mayor of San Francisco will not even send the police out on a call unless there's violence involved and a criminal violent act occurring. She will send out professionals, conflict resolution folks, social workers, folks that can counsel and help those that are mentally challenged. Because what we're finding, and the reason I wrote that column, Don't Call the Police, we're finding that when the police are called, there is a confrontation no matter how minor the allegation. I just met with the commissioner of the Warren Police Department over an Amazon truck driver incident where the Amazon truck driver had been slammed to the ground, could have been killed over what? Parking on the wrong side of the street. These officers are not trained to deal with human beings.
So, Chief Riley, and you occupy, I think, with tonight's forum, you occupy a very special seat because you're the only active sitting police chief on this panel. The video that I saw in Detroit Sunday evening of a police cruiser, it has been shared all over the world. It's been viewed over 1 million times. One is a bad look.
It is a bad look.
On the city. And to me, it's like, and the next day, and you don't have to speak for Chief Craig, but I want to know if it was your city, if this was Inkster, what you would do. The next day, Chief Craig and the mayor basically talked about the officers were facing imminent threat. Now, the video I saw, I didn't see no imminent threat. But my point is, though, they spoke about what the officers in the car were facing. They never talked about expressing the need to protect the sanctity of life. They never talked about the need to protect the constitutional right to free assembly, protest, the right to protest. Nothing whatsoever. It was about the so-called imminent threat. I call it so-called imminent threat that the officers face. If this was Inkster Police Department, what would you do? Your take on that issue?
Well, I've been in policing for 35 years. Believe me, God knows I've had to deal with a lot of incidents, good and bad, life gone, life taken. And one of the key issues And that is so important when anything involves the police. And this is key. We have to be as transparent as possible. And when I mean transparent as possible, it's got to come from both sides. It has to come from the police department, and it has to come from the citizens as well, or who may be representing the citizens. And the reason why that is so important is because it's exactly as you say, Bangalore, and the gentleman before you. You want to know what caused this action. Okay, why did the vehicle take off in the middle with the demonstrators? You want to know. But and I don't mean to use the word but. It is important for us to know, and that's why transparency is so important. That's why it's so important to have a dialogue. That's why it's so important for the public, your citizens, to trust you. You know, the gentleman mentioned San Francisco, and let me say this. We have to have policing in this country. We have to have policing in this world. But there has to be a transformation of policing, as the gentleman has mentioned. It's not about the total protection of property. It is about public safety. Public, me, you, the public. And for me, one of the first things I would have done was, if a situation like that would occur, is to find out. My first question is, I might have used some different type of language, but I would say something of, what in the devil happened? We'd have looked at the video. We'd have talked to witnesses. We'd have said, what went on here? And then we'd have had an honest conversation with the public. Say, hey, look, this is what we found. This is continue to be under investigation. And sit down and have a dialogue. One of the things, and this is so important to mention, when all these things are going on, and people say, well, Chief, you know, we like to have a march in the city of Inkster. And I always ask them, I said, look, we're not having these issues. They always say, well, Chief, we know we're not having the issues here in Inkster. We know where we come from and where we are now. We want to show solidarity to what's going on, not only in, like I said, Minneapolis, but also what's going on in Detroit and so forth. And my answer is, hey, look, guys, I am for peaceful demonstration. I understand it. And I think that we must make sure that there is proper change in policing. I'm not one to say, well, we don't know. There has to be some changing in how we police and how we relate to the public. And when I was not in town, when I saw the incident down in Detroit, but when I did see it and I saw the video, I saw it on CNN, I saw it somewhere else. And the first thing came to my mind, I said something else, but I was like, oh my God, what's going on? And the first thing I looked at, I said, well, I hope nobody got hurt or seriously hurt or anyone got killed. And I have not seen a response to what the mayor said or what the police chief said, but I saw the written response of what others have come back and say that we're not happy with their response. And I can only say from having been in crisis situations like that, is that one of the biggest things is to have the public have faith in you. They got to have faith in you that, hey, if Chief Riley said this from point A to point B is why this officer did that, or Chief Riley say, hey, look, right now this is the preliminary of what's been said, but we'll look into it and we will get back to you. I would want my citizens, or the majority of citizens, say, well, we trust Chief Riley. He's always been upfront with us. He's always been honest with us. And if he says he's going to look into it and get back with us, then we know that he will.
Well, Chief, what happened in that case was the video was released. The cops released the video.
Okay.
And the video that was released that showed, the video did not show any provocation on the side of the protesters. Okay. What it showed was that, in fact, it was a police vehicle that first attempted to drive and got the protesters moving. So the video that was released by the department does not support the so-called evidence or the explanation that the mayor gave and the police chief gave. Because I believe that if the video, if it supported their evidence, there would have been arrests being made by now, but there is none whatsoever. They keep telling us that they are investigating. What I'm saying is that I brought that up because an incident like that only makes situations worse. It's only going to make people, one, dislike the police. Right. Number two, they're not going to trust the police. I mean, what I saw when a police cruiser, that's vigilante policing. That's vigilante policing. I mean, Sam, Bagenstos, am I wrong? Tina, am I wrong?
No, I mean, you have to obviously police with the motto of protect and to serve. You can't do that if you're ramming people in a car. and they're unarmed. You know, there has been no finding that they've had any weapons on them. They said that a window
That's right.
was broken out, but I think Sam said it, that a car is a dangerous weapon. If that was any other person without a badge, they would be facing a felonious assault charge right now, and that's a 15.
Well, it happened but let's say this, Tina, it happened in Charlottesville.
Yeah.
The white supremacist march. A white supremacist was convicted.
Killed.
A white supremacist was convicted for driving a car into a protest in Charlottesville.
Right.
Right, and somebody was killed. You know, there was a young man killed. So this is definitely a matter of public safety, but this is the police that are violating those very basic norms and those laws. I mean, this is not, you know, something that we can be on the fence about. This is a law that can be proven in court. And if it was anyone else not in a badge, that's what would have happened.
Go ahead, Chief Riley.
Look, one of the things I would say is that, and that's why communication is so important, and that's why it is important that you get all the facts that when I mean we, the public, get all the facts of what happened. Now, and based on what you're telling me, what you saw and what you've seen and heard, there's nothing supports the fact that, hey, there's a gunshot went off or anything.
Right, and the reason, and Chief Riley, let me tell you the reason why I said that. You see,
okay,
we know Chief Craig. We know his MO. We know how he rolls. Okay. We can write a book about him. If he had any supporting evidence, he will have a media party and unveil it, because that's the game he plays. He has no supporting evidence. That's why he has offered nothing. We know the character we're dealing with. We know Mike Duggan. We know Chief Craig. If they had any supporting evidence against those protesters, Chief Craig would lay it out 24 hours. Sam Riddle, am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. You know you're not wrong. But I will say this, and that is that Chief Craig is one of the most sophisticated law enforcement officials in the nation, and he knows how to effectively communicate. And if he had anything to hang his hat on that would substantiate that trip down the rabbit hole that he's taking right now, he would use it. He would call a press conference. He called 3 press conferences, but he has nothing to hang his hat on. So down the rabbit hole he goes. But we know those rabbit holes very well.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Look, everything you guys know. You guys know. So
let me go to Sam Bagenstos. Sam, your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, so I just want to say, I mean, I don't know that I have a lot to add about the particular Detroit situation. I mean, you all have much more experience. What I can say though is it's really a disturbing trend we've seen all around the country. So it's not just Heather Heyer in Charlottesville. We've seen time after time after time this tactic of police officers driving through nonviolent crowds, and we saw it in New York City when the first set of these protests broke out. But we've seen it time after time, and in part it's because there's a culture that gets set from the top, all around. And there's also a culture that transmits across the rank and file in many police departments that, look, we are justified in doing whatever it is we think we need to do. We are not governable, essentially. We are the governors. We are not the people who are governed. And that's why I talk about accountability so much, because there's no one holding folks to account. If you know that when you drive through a nonviolent crowd of people, you're going to have people have your back, rather than people say that's not what we're paying you to do. That's a violation of people's constitutional rights. That could be a crime itself. If you know that people that there's no one holding you to account, what's going to stop you from doing it again and again and again? And we've seen this culture around the country that's really broken out around this.
But Bankole, what the professor says, just going in on it a little bit, unless there are consequences, and there must be severe consequences for this inhumane behavior. Now, the chief, he said when he came in to Inkster, he wanted to know right off the bat, is anyone immune from firing?
Correct.
And that's important, because you can't keep rewarding bad behavior because of police unions that intimidate the administration.
Correct.
And you've got to have consequences for bad policing. I believe we saw that really right off the bat in Minneapolis in terms of how they handled that. I interviewed Attorney General Keith Ellison on my Riddle at Random show on 910 Superstation, and some folks thought I was a little harsh with him, and it was before he was handed the case, and they had not charged anyone. And he said, well, we can't charge, and this is a cop-out, we can't charge unless we can win the case. What the hell do you mean? You charge us every damn day, with the most serious thing you can charge us with, but the police are held to a different standard after, you know, that 8-minute and 46-second lynching on the streets of Minneapolis? Give me a break. But I'm not here, you know, to preach on that so much as to drive home one simple point. There must be consequences for bad policing, and we've got to redefine the whole concept of public safety so that resources go where we can save lives and work with people so we get productive citizens on the street, not T-shirts and funerals.
I wholeheartedly agree. There has to be, if Bangle, if you don't mind,
Sure, go ahead.
There has to be consequences. There has to, look, you know, there's no way in the world that we can continue down a path that there's no consequences for bad behavior. There's just no way. You know, if that man had told me that there was somebody in the police department that was untouchable, I would have never took the job. You know, never took the job. But I said, well, then you cannot have no reform. You cannot have no transformation. So there has to be consequences. And for me, that been in this job for a long period of time, and someone that gets up every day with energy to say, what else are we going to change in this job? That's big for me, because without consequences, there can be no change. What is it? Without pain, there can be no change. It's simple as that. Without pain, there can be no change. And we have to have change. And you're right. There are some places where they may be afraid of the union. That, hey, well, I don't want to be bothered with the union. What is I'm going to get it right. What I've heard. Well, you know they're going to file a grievance. You know, I could care less about a grievance. That means nothing to me. Do your homework. Put A, B, C. The same way when I worked homicide, I laid out a case against an individual that may have murdered another individual. It's the same way I would lay out a case against a police officer that I think did something wrong, violate the law. I would lay the same case out and say, here it is. Do something with it. There is no difference in laying out a case that somebody did something wrong, whether it be a law enforcement officer or whether it be a civilian. There is no difference. And when we start splitting those hairs, that if somebody goes out here the same way when that guy beat, what's his name on the hood of that car? It is an assault, it is an assault, it is an assault, it is an assault, and you lay out the case the same way. And like I said, you know, but I always say, we make sure we look at everything we have, all the evidence we have, the witnesses we have, and like you said, Bangalore, I didn't see anything that I would want to say that a shot was fired or anything. Well, you know what? That's when that review come in. That's when somebody say, hey, look, we don't see it. What is the next phase in this game here? What is the next phase? Is the next phase that the prosecutor looks at it? Is the next phase that the attorney general looks at it? But there has to be a next phase to make sure that what was done is done right. And remember this, and I keep telling someone, because my nephew brought this to my attention, what can be done? Remember, voting plays a part of this too, because who's going to make the decision? The prosecutor. They don't make the decision. Who else is above them? The attorney general. The judges. Don't forget the judges too in all of this. We must make sure that everybody is working in unison to make sure that people are held accountable. I'm not saying they got to work together against someone, but we just got to make sure that everybody understands that there has to be accountability.
All right. Chief Craig right there. Tina, your take?
Chief Riley. But yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with him.
Sorry, Chief Riley, not Chief
That
Craig.
right, yeah.
let me correct it for the record. Exactly, because this has been recorded.
Craig,
Chief Riley, not Chief Craig. No. Chief Craig has to walk his way up to earn an invitation to this seat where Chief Riley is sitting in. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, I think it's refreshing that we have Chief Riley here saying that, yes, police do need to be held accountable, because like you said, when it comes to Chief Craig, we don't hear that from him. You know, he defends these actions. That's what he said about the police car that just rammed into the protesters, you know, that basically what else could they do? Well, they could not drive the car. You know, they can call in backup. They had other cars available. There's a lot you can do. And that just comes back to the original point I made, is this whole we can't do anything about it motto. When it comes to our elected officials, when it comes to our appointed officials like a Chief Craig, you know, there's plenty we can do about it. Just because this way that we've been doing it has been broken for so long doesn't mean it can't be fixed, because it is necessary, because there is still a public safety function that it can fulfill. So I think it's very refreshing to hear someone like Chief Riley say that, you know what, impunity is necessary, right? That we cannot have lawless cops, right? Because we're important and we're necessary. We're a very integral component of a safe society and of a community, because, you know, people need someone that they can go to be safe, to be, supported, to resolve disputes. We're humans. That's going to happen. That's not going to go away. So if there is a culture of community in policing, if there is a culture of respect and a public safety function as the primary goal, not a abusive power and not a power trip, honestly, then I think that we can see a lot done. And it takes, you know, somebody like a Chief Riley to institute that, to take that job and say, this is what's going to happen. And if you don't like it, you can leave. But we don't have too many chiefs around the country saying that, obviously. You know, right here in Detroit, we don't have that. So that's where, again, and Chief Riley also mentioned the voting component. So that's where, again, it comes into our public officials, because there's so much that they can do. Unfortunately, we haven't seen the right types of officials in office to do these things, because there are too many who are, quite honestly, just too afraid. I think there are a lot that are too, not confused, but just don't know that they have the power to make those changes. And if that's what the case is, they don't need to be where they are either, because you have to understand the role that you serve and the power that comes along with it, and the responsibility as well. And that goes for the council, that goes for the mayors, that goes for the governors. I mean, we have this entire political system serving themselves, right, instead of actually serving citizens, and that's what we need to change. And we're just so used to it and not being, you know, working for people, and we're so used to people being jaded by the system, and that's why people don't show up and vote. And we have these same conversations over and over again, but we're gonna have to keep having these same conversations until change happens. And again, this is the perfect time to do it, because we are seeing in real time just how devastating this can be globally. We're seeing how devastating the human race how susceptible we are when it comes to something like, you know, first this pandemic, and now this incident of police brutality that is not unique, but just set off a global crisis, right? And set off a global protest, and set off global awareness, and it is not going anywhere. There are still people in Chicago just a couple of days ago. There were still thousands of people in the street. You know, no matter what the politicians and media try to say about it dying down, it's not going to die down. It's not going to go away, because this is the time to make those changes. So it has to be, anyone who cares about it has to be, you know, again, has to step up on it. But the people who are in positions of power who can make those changes, they have to take it upon themselves to do it. They have to do what people elected them to do. And if they don't, they have to be voted out. You know, people have to be empowered to run against them, or people have to be empowered to challenge them and make them do more. I say this often on your show, Bankole, that even though we vote, voting is not enough. Our vote at the actual ballot box, at the poll, our vote doesn't end there. It ends with following through on what these elected officials say that they're going to do for us. And it ends with actually seeing those changes happen. And until they happen, you know, either we're going to keep pressuring you to do it, or we're going to put somebody else in office to get you out of there, because you're not going to do it, and you've told us that. So, you know, it's like earning interest on money, you know. So if you put some money away in a savings account and it earns good interest, where you leave it there. If it does not, you take it out, you put it somewhere else, right? That can capitalize on what you have and what your assets are, because that's best for you. So we need to think about our vote in that way, because it has the same kind of power. And we need to, you know, really hone in on these public officials and elected officials who are comfortable where they are, and make them uncomfortable, until that, you know, society can be more comfortable with public safety as the center focus of policing.
Yeah, and voting is very important, Tina Patterson and Banker Thompson and Chief Riley. I'm so glad you brought that up. But also the role of exercising First Amendment guarantees in terms of these protests. You know, earlier I mentioned that the city of Los Angeles approved a $150 million cut to the Los Angeles Police Department. You know what one of the council people said? Let me read it directly. I want to take this time to acknowledge Black Lives Matter, LA organizers, and others for keeping our feet to the fire and demanding more from our government. That was Councilman Curran Price. He said that yesterday. They moved on it today. He said that the recent social activism was a movement that has amassed support from every corner of the globe, as you just pointed out, Tina, and shows no sign of stopping. That was the difference between a Los Angeles City councilman as they transform, Chief, I like that a lot, transform the approach to public safety. They cut the budget and they'll put those dollars elsewhere to meet some of the needs. But what I'm saying is, Tina Patterson, what you're saying, you're in step with what that Los Angeles City councilman said. And it's so important to understand because the facts, we just use them on the battlefield of ideas. And the world knows Black folk are incarcerated more than 5 or 6 times the rate of whites, 3 times more likely to be killed, than whites, and 40% of the folks killed unarmed by police officers are Black, and we're just 6% of the population. There's something wrong with that data. Something wrong with that data because it's accurate and it's an indictment. It's an indictment of policing in America.
Yeah, Sam, your take.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think once again, what this comes back to is accountability, and here, you know, accountability to the public. If the public is not standing up and saying, we demand change here, then things aren't going to change. And conversely, and I think Sam Riddle, you make a great point about this, when the public stands up and really says, we demand change here, doesn't just accept, you know, just some public relations response, but actually demands real change, you know, then the government will respond. But it takes really sustained effort. It takes a mass of people to really push these issues. And it does take, I mean, to get back to voting, it does take making these things a voting issue. What Chief Riley said is exactly right. You know, when people walk into the voting booth, you know, I mean, first of all, people have to show up and go vote. And secondly, when they walk into the voting booth, you know, people are often thinking about the high profile races like the race for president or governor or sometimes mayor. But you know, even then turnout is not as high as it should be. But you know, they're not thinking about who's the prosecutor. They're not thinking about who are the judges. They're not thinking about, when I'm voting for someone for city council, am I voting for someone who's going to support making real change on these issues or not? Have I gone to meetings to demand that they actually come forward with a plan for change or not? I think it really takes a lot of work. Now, you know, obviously there are a lot of forces arrayed on the other side that want the status quo to remain. And, you know, I don't want to make this sound like this is just something that people can change if only they want it enough. But it's also true that, you know, that there's no denying numbers when numbers actually show up. When they show up in city council meetings, when they show up on the streets, when they show up.
That's right.
All right. So we're going to start taking questions at 7:15. If you have a question or comment, we're going to bring in your questions now to the panel here. Given what we are seeing with Minneapolis, the New York City Council, I think, is right now moving towards they've removing $1 billion from the budget, from the police budget, to social service needs and so forth. We're seeing what LA is doing, what San Francisco is doing. How does that look for this area? I mean, let me go to Chief Riley in the City of Inkster. What is it that you're doing? I mean, how are you moving in concert with the tide that, with the Black Lives Matter tide that we're doing? Are you,
Well,
go ahead.
I would say this, the funding would not work for us because we're already behind the 8 ball. We don't have enough personnel as it is to what we want to do to be effective policing. And again, I understand it. I understand the concept of what they're talking about, defunding. I think they're thinking about something else, and that is what one of the gentlemen earlier mentioned about putting more money into mental health. Because you know what, it would be nice that, hey, we have a mental health call out on a 24-hour call, so then we have those issues. You know, it'd be nice if we had something 24-hour call out for substance abuse when these people are, when these individuals are suffering. It would be so nice to have it. We don't have it, but if we had things set up, and again, but Bangla, you see how all this is tied right back into poverty.
Mm-hmm.
Do not have. Who are the most vulnerable portions of our society right now? When you look at the children, you look at the senior citizens, but you look at those that are suffering from mental health, autism, substance abuse. They are so vulnerable because there's not enough funding there for them. So who does it fall upon to deal with it? It falls upon law enforcement to deal with it. Now, we're strapped because we're strapped with a tight budget. Then we look at the fact that, hey, we're strapped with a tight budget, but yet we're trying to work around these issues. And that's why I say, we have to be very, very careful about talking about defunding, because so many organizations in our state, the state of Michigan, are scrambling for enough money to have enough officers on the street so that we can do some of these positive things. Believe me, we can do these positive things. We can do, we're doing here in Inkster, so I know we can do them, and we shorthanded. So that it has to be a balance. I agree that, hey, in some of these places, you may need to shift that money to where you can have mental health on call 24 hours, substance abuse on call 24 hours, somebody to deal with all these issues 24 hours that can either ride along with the police or meet the police at a particular site, or even be part of the police department as themselves. But the key of it is we still have to go back. Now, I don't want no one to leave it up. We still have to transform policing. There still has to be some transformation of policing in America to make that turn. Because when we have that transformation, we'll be able to deal with the issues of health care while these people are sick and can't get the care that they need, that mental health care. Because that's tied into health care too. Everybody think about health care, they think about, hey, well, you got a sick, you got a cold. No, mental health is tied into there. Substance abuse is tied into health care. Okay, poverty, all this is tied into one. And it has an effect on policing and how we police. And it has an effect on what the police look at and what we feel that we want to deal with. So all this is important. So we just can't separate and pull everything out.
That's right.
Again, we have to look at the people in charge. The people that, one, hire the police chief, the people, whether it be the mayor or whether it be, in some places, the city manager. And mainly, if I could, I'd like to stress on something. If you let me stress on something. When I was a young officer in the city of Newport News, okay, in Virginia, there's some things that I saw that I did not feel comfortable with. And when, I spoke out, which I did, because that's the way I was raised, where I was brought up, and where, as we say, the way I was built, you're looked upon differently. And I remember one of my training officers coming to me, and he gave me the best advice, and I always live by. And he said, Riley, you got to let your work speak for yourself and stand and be a man. When something is not right, it's not right. You feel it's not right, stand. But let your work speak for yourself, so that when they come at you, your work will speak for you, and you have that pushback. And the reason what I'm getting to is this: I brought some of these things to people's attention that were in government. Okay, some of the things that I saw were not right that dealt with Black people. Not only Black people on the street, but hell, Black people inside the organization themselves. Okay, so that's why I make this case that, hey, it's not just the police chief themselves that they need to look at this transformation. We're to look at the governing body in some of these cities that allow this to go on, that when it's brought to their attention. Because I'm pretty sure if you took a poll of most of the Black officers that are retired, Black officers that are on duty right now, still employed right now, they will probably tell you that there's issues that are going on that may have been racial issues or whatever, or things that they saw, and they probably brought that to attention of some of the people in government or some people that should have had or in a place to make a change, and it never did. And I guarantee you, as you go back and you look at some of these cases, it was there. Why? Because I lived it myself, and I know it's true. And even to the day, that when you may have a police department, that even when I was going young, you may have 600 or 700 officers. You might have 50 sergeants. But when you look at it, you have 50 sergeants, and only maybe 3 or 4 of them are black. But you live in a city that's 50-50. Now, you not telling me there's a problem somewhere? That's what I'm talking about. Give that some thought. That's some thought. It ain't just the police chief. We better look at who is over the police chiefs and who's running governments, these city governments and county government.
I know we're getting ready to take a question here.
Yeah, but it is.
But there's also something that's entering my mind right now, and that's the reality of who can afford and who can't afford to defund. Inkster can't begin to think in terms of defunding. I'm sure Councilwoman Watley would agree with me. I have Councilwoman Watley on the show every now and then from Inkster.
Absolutely.
But when I say that the LA Police Department did a $150 million cut, they can afford to defund. They have a budget of $1.86 billion.
Yes.
Different ball game.
Absolutely.
Different ball game than Inkster. And again, the role that poverty plays leads me to believe that one of the things we might want to do, Professor, is consider at the national level some type of police agency. And I know we got layers and layers of bureaucracy, but with funding to address some of the public safety issues that the Inksters, the Selmas, the Benton Harbors, maybe departments can't afford.
Right.
So that they can address the issue of providing professionals to address the issues of those who are autistic, the issues of those with mental challenges, the issues of those that might need domestic counseling to cut down on domestic violence, because the police are ill-equipped to deal with many of the calls that they go out on that result in confrontations that lead to needless deaths and shootings. I mean, we can do better, but we have to move at that level. And if we do that, then we might need to defund the damn Pentagon.
I mean, I will say, I just really appreciate that. We definitely need the federal government to step in and really fund these alternatives to policing, you know, that where police are being required to do things that not only are they not trained to do, I mean, it's really not right to have them do it. You can give them all the training you want. You know, if someone's in mental health crisis, what they need is a mental health crisis team responding.
That's right.
Someone who is responding with police training. They need someone who's responding who knows what to do. You know, when you know, we know now with coronavirus, every state in the country, our state, but every state in the country, every city in the country is going to be facing a massive budget crunch. The only entity that's going to be able to pay for this stuff is going to be the federal government. So we need the federal government to step in and pay for these sorts of things, and that will reduce the need that people feel for having so many police officers. And you know, there is a public safety function that of enforcing the laws, of fighting crime, you know, of solving crime, and often that's getting diverted to all sorts of other things. And so we need to have these alternatives really stood up. And I'll just say one thing: when I was in the Obama administration, you know, I did a number of investigations of mental health systems around the country, and worked with a number of states, you know, sometimes in a very adversarial way, sometimes not. But, you know, often what we found was in state after state after state, they just hadn't invested in community-based mental health crisis response. You know, so when someone goes into mental health crisis, the only thing you can do is call the cops. And when I went into the state of Georgia, which they're big, states' rights people, they didn't like Obama poking around in their business. I mean, it was really very classic, old school stuff. But, when I started talking about this, you had some of the Southern sheriffs were the white Southern sheriffs were the ones who were most on board with what we were doing. They started really nodding their heads saying, yeah. Our jails are full of people who we don't need to have in jail because we don't have appropriate community-based mental health services. We're responding to calls that we shouldn't be responding to because we don't have appropriate community-based mental health services. And the answer isn't just have social workers ride along with the police. It's don't have the police respond to those calls. Have people who know how to respond to these calls.
Absolutely.
Doing that.
All right. Let's take some questions. Anybody has a question?
We have a question from Cliff Martin. I'm going to unmute him now.
All right. Let's go to Cliff. Cliff, go ahead.
Well. Hey, thank you guys for doing this first.
Well, thank you for tuning in.
Absolutely. I have a lot to say, but I know I don't have a lot of time, so I'm just going to say something pretty simple. If we can help the City Charter Commission get on board with where the needs are and how our Charter Commission, like Joanna Underwood's and Ms. Smalls, they're the entryway into our homes. If we have a bad Charter Commission and a bad mayor, then they have a back door key to destroy us. If we have a good Charter Commission, then it doesn't matter what the mayor does, he can't get in. So my point is, if we could redouble our efforts to help those types of voted bodies, like Willie Burton, for instance. These are things that are already in place. If we could just, if the citizens of Detroit, if we could just back them up, then that's, I think, a great place to start in our city with the democracy that we're given.
Cliff, what you're saying has a lot of
Thank you
substance.
so much,
Cliff
Cliff.
is speaking about the Detroit City Charter Commission. We're being watched all over the world, literally, Cliff. And one of the things that disturbs me a little bit about the current quality of bullhorn leadership, I'm talking about some of the activists that are participating in some of the demonstrations, is that it's one thing to draft a list of demands for the mayor and the police chief. It's another thing to codify that list of demands when you have currently a Detroit City Charter Revision Commission that's functioning right now. There's a deadline of July 31st, and you could take those demands that you're presenting to the chief of police and the mayor of Detroit, to the Detroit City Charter Revision Commission bullhorn leadership, just write them out. Doesn't have to even be grammatically correct. They've got people they've hired that can draft that into language that can be presented to the people of Detroit in an election once the state of Michigan has approved it. But my point is Cliff has a very valid point there. And Bankole, Detroit, all that international perceived swag, yet we have a Detroit Police Commission, which okayed the systemic racism of facial recognition technology, which misidentifies Black folks over 90% of the time. Those aren't my words. Those are the words of Chief Craig. I think he used the figure 96% of the time. You've got a situation where we can work systems and processes, but we have to use something that a lot of us are not used to using, and that's the upper part of the head, the brain, rather than the mouth, for whatever that's worth, bullhorn leadership.
All right, Sam Riddle right here. Who next? Who do we have? Who has the next question? All right, let me weave in facial recognition technology then, because that's another issue that ties into this, and that is the disparity in the misidentification of Black and brown people. Let me go to Chief Riley on that, because I've written a column saying that that should be ended. And studies have shown that out. You know, and the last time I checked, we don't have scientists, we don't have research scientists, you know, we basically don't have scientists who are running the police department. You know, these are law enforcement executives, law enforcement officials. And what I've seen a number of times is that Chief Craig comes out as if he's a scientist. I mean, he's actually arguing against the data, or the data analyst. And so, Chief Riley, your take on facial recognition technology. Does the City of Inkster have this?
No, the City of Inkster, we do not have facial recognition. We don't have it. We were fortunate enough to get a grant from the state to look at putting up some cameras in the city, you know, for the city citizens.
Okay.
To make sure that we want to make our city as safe as possible. But I made no uncertain terms that did not want and to deal with facial recognition, because you know, some may not like it. Well, I say that's just tough cookie. I'm not a fan of it at this point. No, I'm just not a fan of it. I was at a Chiefs conference, or I think it was last year, and that came up, and that subject matter came up, and yes, there were a lot of pushback and issues of the fallibility that comes with facial recognition. My problem with it is that, hey, it needs tweaking, needs a lot of tweaking, and the fact that, hey, I would rather have people, come on, let's do some of the old-fashioned stuff first to make sure that we connect all the dots before we just jump on facial recognition when you know it is not, when you know you have all these issues with it. And so for me, even if I had, you gave me $1 million a day, Bangalore, and said, Chief, I'll give you this if you get facial recognition. Well, you know what? I won't have that $1 million, because we're not there yet, in my opinion. I think more needs to be done, and to make it better. More needs to be done to there's been a lot of pushback from the people, even from the people that use facial recognition and the people that put it together. They know that the shortfalls within it. So they need to, you know, let them fix the issues before they roll it out even further. Me, no, not a fan of it. And if I had the money to get it, I still wouldn't get it. Right now, I would use what we plan on using is cameras up at certain sites, so that to offer as best protection for our citizens and those that visit the city as possible, but not facial recognition. No, I would not.
All right, interesting right there. That's the first time I'm hearing that. Chief Craig here. Sam Bagenstos, your take on that, facial recognition technology here. Here's the police chief who said, no, he doesn't want it.
No.
I think that's really wise. I mean, you know, I think there's often a rush to adopt new technology. And there's this story people tell themselves that, well, computers can't be biased. You know, you're taking the humans out of it, and so they're not biased. And what we find again and again and again is actually these technological solutions turn out to just build in the biases that we already have in our policing system, or in our healthcare system, or in employment. And so this is a problem we see all through society. It's not just in policing. And, you know, I think a lot of people also think it's very worrisome from a civil liberties perspective. The idea that you have some computer that's fingering you for having done something that you may not have done. You know, the idea that people are being tracked all the time by the government, but you know, the bias is really important, and I think people need to get back past the gee whiz factor for new technology and computers. You know, it looks really cool in the movies, but we see over and over again that we have these biases. And here, you know, the false identifications and the way they're skewed based on race. I mean, there's no way a responsible police department should be using that right now.
Correct.
No doubt. Tina, your take. And then we'll go to a question from Brenda Butler. Tina, your take on that.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I think that multiple studies have shown that this technology is inherently biased. And to Sam Bagenstos' point, yes, it's a system, it's a technology. You know, we don't think about it as, we think about it as just automation because that's what it is, but it was still built based on some kind of coding by a person. So somebody is still embedding their own biases in this technology. You know, technology in and of itself is not completely free from prejudice because it's built by humans, you know, and humans have all of their biases. And when it comes to racially discriminatory biases, when it comes to racism, I mean, these are some of the worst biases to have. And why would you ever want to implement a system like that into a police department, right? That is already that already has a racist culture. We've seen it in the Detroit Police Department in the 6th precinct. Without the facial recognition technology, that there was a racist culture from white officers who would prefer to stop Blacks in the middle of the daytime, who would taunt, you know, young Black women in the middle of winter. These are human behaviors that we already have seen. So why would you implement on top of that technologically racist behaviors in the police department? And now we've seen it with, I think it was Robert Williams, his story has gone national, that he was picked out of a lineup, you know, from facial recognition only, and that's it. And to me, what gets me is that the chief and some others, I think the mayor perhaps, but particularly Chief Craig was mentioning that, well, it was just this one time and we don't use it for this function. Well, that still slipped through the cracks. And that's still enough to be a vital concern for any police department, that we have this problem, that this already racist technology, we're implementing it. And now we've seen that it can have very damaging effects because we arrested the wrong person. Why? Because he was a Black guy. That was it. You know, so I think that has to be really looked at again. Obviously, I'm not in support of it. I have never been. I've written about that. I think it needs to be banned in the city of Detroit. I don't think it needs to be supported or funded anymore. And these are the reasons why. You know, to me, it just makes common sense. There's no safety in that. It's not a useful tool if it's going to be, you know, just so inaccurate, so misidentifying, and so racially prejudiced.
And you know, Bankole, there are so many tools we have. This platform we're on right now with the PuLSE Institute, this is another form of protest against bad policy, policing in America. And you just mentioned not funding facial recognition technology, Attorney Patterson. This woman over my shoulder here, this Congresswoman, Rashida Tlaib, shown at a PuLSE Institute forum, along with Pastor Kimla, myself, and Bankole Thompson, and you were there, Tina. That Congresswoman, Rashida Tlaib, has proposed that not one penny go for facial recognition technology after she went through a dog and pony show by Chief Craig at the Detroit Police Department. And see, that's the strength of political leadership we need on issues. We need a strength of political leadership. When we come together today, one of the focuses, of course, was about leadership, political leadership, and the issues of policing in this nation. And in Michigan right now, there is a lack of strong political leadership to take on bad policing and to develop public safety for people, for real human beings. You know, Minneapolis, they now are coming up with the concept of a community safety and violence prevention department. Not a police department, but one that focuses in on community safety and violence prevention. And Chief said it, we're talking about a transformation. And that's what's needed right now, with strong political leadership, not afraid to take on the old ways. Why do we do it? Because that's the way we've always done it. But the way we've always done it is damn wrong, people.
Yeah, let's go to the next question. Let's go to Brenda. Brenda has a question or comment. Brenda Butler. Brenda, are you there? Hi.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead, Brenda, you're on.
Yes. As we speak on the facial recognition, my question is to the panel, does either you know with this facial recognition law, are there policies included in this law for a citizen who is placed under false arrest how are they compensated for, say, their attorney fees or their job, losing their jobs? And if there is not policies included in the facial recognition law, is that unlawful to not have these policies?
All right, who wants to take that?
I think
Was
Professor
the only one
Badcock
jumped
can
at
take
once?
Sam, go ahead. Sam Bagenstos, you want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, so if someone is arrested without probable cause, then they have a right to compensation. But I mean, here's the thing: what a lot of judges will say is that this that this facial recognition provides probable cause, particularly if some judge signs off on an arrest warrant. So again, it comes back to you got to have judges who take constitutional rights seriously and who take these issues seriously. I do think, you know, if you're going to have a system like this, I mean, I don't think you should have a system like this with so many errors. If you're going to have a system like this that does predictably make so many errors, you have to build in some way of holding people harmless when you make errors. I mean, I think the better way to deal with it is what Chief Riley said, which is just, let's hit the pause button on this thing. It's not something that can work right now. But if they're going to do it, then they ought to compensate the people who are harmed by it for sure. Do they have to do that? You know, that's a problem with our law.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, that's why Prosecutor Kim Worthy in Wayne County apologized. And when do you see that? A Wayne County prosecutor apologized to Mr. Williams for the prosecution that ensued. I mean, it was like literally almost, it was so horrible what occurred to this guy, and he's going to end up with a settlement. And there must be consequences. We've got to have consequences when this techno-racism rears its ugly head. And if those in law enforcement right now choose to employ it, to use it, then there's got to be consequences for the misidentification. It'll take him forever to get his record cleared, if it ever does. Because once you get into that data bank, man, you're in there. You're in there forever.
Yeah, and just one more thing about that is that not only is it, I like that phrase, techno-racism, not only is that obviously the main issue of what's wrong with facial recognition technology, but the question itself is also a secondary issue about, okay, well, what happens when it's an apparent violation, right? A violation of constitutional rights,
right.
Of civil liberties. You know, these are and constitutional rights are like the foundation of how we base our government, because this is the entity that can infringe upon these sacred rights. But what happens when you have a system like this that is inherently biased and almost completely do exactly that, right? Almost completely built to do exactly what the government should not be doing. So if this is a responsible government entity, the city council, the mayor, whoever is trying to implement this technology, what are they really looking at when they do that? You know, are they looking at the safety of their citizens when it comes to if they're targeting 80% of the city, which Detroit is 80% Black city. So in my opinion, 80% of Black people are targets under this type of technology because it's so indistinguishable. So are they really looking to protect Black folks under this type of technology? But number two, are they really seeing it through just how badly it can go wrong and what their responsibility is when it comes to being a responsible and accountable public body? Because it is just fraught with potential constitutional violations and civil liberties. And do we want to pay for that again? I mean, there's just such as one-track mind about, okay, latest technology, shiny toy, let's grab it. But that's not as simple as it is, because there are so many different scenarios you need to envision when you're setting up a system like this, you know, aside from the obvious studies that say it's inherently biased. So again, it just comes back to what our frame of mind is when we're talking about policing, when we're talking about government, and when we're talking about accountability to citizens.
No question. Who do we have next? We have another question from Cliff
Can
Martin.
I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead. Who's that? us who you are.
Tahira.
Oh,
This is
Tahira,
Tahira.
that's
I
right.
want to.
Tahira, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. I wanted to kind of keep things in perspective as to what policing is. I mean, it started way back when they were chasing enslaved our ancestors, you know, and that's the way the police departments were set up from slave catchers. And the slave catchers were racist. A lot of police are racist. And to be able to stop racists, you got to get in their mind. I think that all the police departments need to fire everybody and have them all reapply in a way that will keep us safe. There's a police officer in Buffalo, New York. Her name is Caroline Horn, I think it is. She stopped one of her fellow officers from choking a man, and they fired her.
Yep,
and they're preventing her from getting.
They fired her. In fact, her case is coming back again because of this. Her case has been brought up again. Yep.
I saw that.
Yes, and so my question to Mr. Riley, is it? Mr. Riley?
Chief Riley.
Does the police have a whistleblower system so that police can blow the whistle on their partner or whatever and stay anonymous? Is that one thing that police departments have or do? And then my other question is the police officers, most of them are racist. They don't like Black people. They don't live around Black people. Shouldn't we have residency back? Because most police officers, white police officers, are racist. And then they really can't help it because they're reared that way. They're brought up to be racist. They know it's wrong, but they can't help it. And so what we need to do is have residency so that the people who live here in Detroit need to be patrolling it.
That's right.
Okay.
If I could, Bangle, if I could respond.
Okay.
We make sure that everybody understands, not just the police officers here, but anyone that works for the city. You know, you have that right that if something you see is not right or going on, to speak up and to be covered. Because like I said, if you see something, you work for an organization, yeah, you fall in the whistleblower. You know, and we encourage you. It is incumbent upon you that if you see something wrong, you've got to say something. There's no hiding. You know, if somebody's doing something wrong, we need to know. And that's just all to it. We need to know, and we need to be able to deal with it. Now, as far as the racism part you mentioned, ma'am, let me say this, and I can only speak from my experience. I've had the luxury. The good Lord has kept me healthy and provided me the opportunity that I've worked on the Southeast Coast region in policing. I've worked down in the South region in Alabama in policing, and I'm now up here in the North region policing. I can say I've had thousands. I've worked around thousands of law enforcement officers, and even in the city of Selma, where some would think that there's a lot of it. Let me say this: the majority of the police officers, and I would say the 99% of the police officers that I've dealt with in my entire career in all the regions, the 3 regions that I've worked in, all of them have been hardworking, genuine people that their goal is to serve the public. But I will say this. There's some of their bosses, whether it be chiefs or some maybe sheriffs or whatever. I would tell you, like I told one of my old Commonwealth attorneys, I told him, there's some people that ain't nowhere in the world that I could work for. There's no way in this world that I could work for. And the reason why that is because I never say, put it this way, how they handle the public and dealt with issues would make me say no, not I wouldn't be able to work with, and the majority of the people that I work with in Newport News, Selma, and even here would never work for them because there's a certain spirit that you have to have. You have to have a spirit, a certain spirit of a police officer, and it's got the spirit of loving your fellow man and fellow woman. And if you don't have that type of spirit in you, or around you, that aura around you, you're not the type of person. One, I'm gonna hire, I'm gonna have around me, or I want to be around. And as far as residency, I think it is important that you have people that live in your city, that work in your city, as many as you possibly can. You know, I sometimes I say there need to be full. Sometimes I say, well, you need to be some sort of a number, but you need a number of people. I do know that live and work in your city, to work your city, and to make sure that they, you know, that they're tied to your city. But again, it goes back to the person in charge. It goes back to that chief or sheriff that's in charge to transform that organization, that whoever you hire. See, it's about hiring too.
Okay.
Whoever you hire, understand that, look, best way I can put it is what I do. When I hire white or black, the first thing I let them know is the city of Inkster is not a place where you're going to come in, you're going to write a lot of tickets and lock people up. We are a city.
So it looks like Detroit. So looks like Detroit need to take mentorship from Inkster. Let's do this. We got 9 more minutes left.
Oh, go ahead. But I just want you to know that.
Yeah, no. But Bankley,
let me
just real quick. What Tahir, that statement of Tahir was very profound, because when you talk about just reforming a system, the system was designed on racist beliefs, practices. And what Tahir said is very profound, because to eliminate the racist component, you would have to evaluate the psychological makeup of white folks who've never been around black folks and determine if they had these inherent biases. Would a police department hire a paranoid schizophrenic that may or may not be on their medication? Racism is that bad. I understand what she means when she says get rid of all of them and start over.
So we have 8 more minutes left, and if you know Zoom, it cuts off right. It cuts right when it's over. I know. So let's do this. We have 2 questions. Let me take 2 questions because I want to have enough time to go back to the panel for closing comments. Let's go to Tia. Tia, and then we'll come to Cliff. Also has a quick. We'll come back to Cliff. Tia, make your question or comment quick.
Okay. First of all, Bankley, kudos to you for the PuLSE Institute for having a think tank policy in Detroit. I think that's great. Real quick, I mean, I have lots of questions, but real quick, to what extent do the panelists think that the gun culture in America has contributed to the police brutality problems that we're facing today?
Great question from Tia right there. To what extent does the gun culture? Let me go to Sam Bagenstos at the Justice Department. Your take.
Look, I think it's got to be a big contributor. I mean, you know, one of the basic problems is you have this culture in a lot of police departments of, you know, we go out and we're in fear of our lives all the time. And a lot of that is overblown if you look at the statistics. But I think a huge part of that, you know, and a huge part of that is this history of racism, and also a history of segregation and police being used to enforce lines of segregation. And I don't think you can forget that. But a huge part of it also is, you know, we are a country that's awash in high-powered guns. And so it is a dangerous place for a lot of people. I think if we could get some of that under control, that would help. I mean, I will say as well, though, our gun laws, you know, they're themselves racialized, right? I mean, when you see protesters in the Capitol building in Lansing, you know, walking around open carrying assault rifles in ways that are clearly threatening, and they're allowed to go about their business and you know, do everything, you know, even go inside the Capitol, holding these weapons in a way that is really threatening to the folks inside, versus Tamir Rice, who you talked about, who had a toy gun and who was killed, right? And there's just no way that's not about race. I'm sorry. And so, you know, guns are a big problem. We need to address them, but we also need to address the intersection of race.
All right, let's take a question. Cliff, make it quick for us. We're at the final leg of this show. Go ahead, Cliff.
Yes, sir. Hey, I'd just like to take it a little further back to something Tina said.
Make it quick. I have 5 minutes. Go ahead, brother. Go ahead.
All right. Well, Tina said mentioned direct inherent power. We have that as homeowners and taxpayers right here in the city. Mm-hmm. Real quick question: what? How do we exercise those abilities to its peak?
vote.
Okay, great. Let me take, Tina, do I give that question to you or give that question to Sam?
Give it to Tina.
I can answer briefly.
Okay, go ahead, make it quick.
So I think that the way that you exercise that power as a homeowner, as a citizen, is obviously through your vote, right? Because that is protecting the community that you live in. That's protecting the community that you pay taxes to. That is protecting the community that you may go to school to. And regardless of if your kids go to school there, you're going to pay for that school district as well. So you have to understand that that is your power. Your power is your vote and then your rights. You have the right to speak up. You have the right to protest, right? You have the right to petition your government. You have the right to go to your public meetings. I mean, there are so many things that everyday citizens can do if they just simply show up and raise their voice, right? But we are led to believe that we have to follow order and we have to follow power, even when that order and that power is not aligned with our values and with their own order and power and how they're supposed to go about doing business. So I think that that is how you can, as a homeowner, as a citizen, exercise their right. And also, again, it doesn't stop with just voting, right? It's showing up and holding your elected officials accountable, because if they're not producing for you, there's no need for them being where they are, because your taxpayer dollars pay for their salary as well. So I think people need to be empowered to know that and take that as their power. But the inherent power I was talking about was also the government power itself. I mean, there's so much that they can do, but they don't do because they're used to being just sitting up on a pedestal with no accountability.
All right, so we got 3 minutes left here. I'm gonna say, let's go around the panel and do final comments in terms of where we go. And each of you will have 40 seconds. Let's do that. Let me start with Sam Bagenstos, and then we'll go to Chief Riley, Sam, and we'll come to Tina.
Yeah, so I'm just going to be really quick. You know, just the one thing I want to emphasize again, what you need is a culture of accountability that starts at the top. It extends all the way down, and it extends throughout the legal and political system. If you don't have a commitment to holding people to account when they violate the Constitution, when they violate people's rights, they're just going to keep on doing it.
Chief Riley?
Transformation and accountability. That's it.
That's it? And no to facial recognition technology.
Correct.
Sam Riddle.
As a veteran, 65 to the end of 68, I would like to see something to compensate citizens that have been victimized by bad policing. I served in the military. I had the GI Bill, housing, education. We need to provide some counseling for that youngster that ran behind the family car. When he saw that police car coming, he's already been traumatized. We need to help him get counseling and education, and for his parents, housing, and a check. Cut a check for the victims of police brutality in this nation or who've been traumatized by it, and redefine policing, turn it into public safety, community well-being.
All right, Tina Patterson, your final comments.
Final comment again goes to public accountability and what we as the public can do to ensure that we can vote, we can show up to our public meetings, we can educate ourselves about who the candidates are that are running, we can pay more attention to our judicial system and who the judges are, we can pay more attention to our city council and the things that they try to pass along the table. I think that we have to hold them accountable because these are the systems in place to protect us. And if they're not doing that, we need to be responsible ourselves to say that this is not working for us and not be afraid to do it because you have every right to do it yourself.
All right. Let me thank our panelists here. Sam Riddle, political veteran, host of Riddle at Random on 9:10 a.m. Superstation, 9 to 11 a.m. every day. Of course, also political director for the Michigan National Action Network, a senior fellow at the PuLSE Institute. William Riley, the police chief of the City of Inkster, who provided a much needed perspective, a different kind of police chief we saw today. So I found out this evening that Chief Craig is not the only one who is on the stage here in Southeast Michigan. There's another police chief, watch out of the City of Inkster. And of course, Chief Riley, you don't need to say anything, I'll do it. Anyway, my opinions are mine. Samuel Bagenstos, law professor at the University of Michigan, former Assistant Attorney General at the Department of Justice, number 2 at the Civil Rights Department of Justice under former President Barack Obama, also a senior fellow at the PuLSE Institute, and of course, Attorney Tina Patterson, the President and Director of Research here at the PuLSE Institute. And of course, yours truly, Banker Thompson, Editor-in-Chief of the PuLSE Institute. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here. And those of you who stayed with us here this evening for this entire conversation, this is a series. So we're getting ready to release another series next week. This forum has been recorded. It will be on the website of the PuLSE Institute. We're going to share it on social media. You can share it for those who are doing research, for those who need the arguments that were made here this evening by Chief Riley, Sam Riddle, Samuel Bagenstos, and Tina Patterson. Those who need those arguments to push the Detroit City Council, to push our legislature, to push Governor Whitmer, to push Mayor Mike Duggan. You have the entire intellectual capital presented in this recorded video here this evening. So thank you all for being here. We urge you to keep following the PuLSE Institute, the pulseinstitute.org. You can read what we're writing, what we're telling you. Another note is that the PuLSE Institute actually has a collection at the University of Michigan Bentley Historical Library. When it was founded, the Bentley approached us, said they want to document what the PuLSE is doing. So everything that we publish and write is also documented for history and for posterity. Thank you all for being here. And Banker Thompson, we'll see you the next time we announce the next forum.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.